hopefully not long beyond that. But the matter is of sufficient importance that the Parliament should pay some attention to it. And in particular, I want to acknowledge that we do have a fairly good presence of MPs here at this hour to deal with the issue. We should have a full house given the nature of the issue,
and most rural MPs are still here,
which shows the critical importance of the matter. Mr. Speaker, last week I updated this Honourable House on the water situation in the corporate area and on some measures that we will need to take to secure our water resilience. The island continues to experience serious drought conditions in many areas, and today I will give an update on the meteorological situation as well as to some of the rural projects being undertaken. Mr. Speaker, on the slide that we are looking at is the 30-year mean rainfall for Jamaica from 1971 to 2000. You will notice that it is a bimodal graph. So here would be your dry period, and here would be another dry period. So the two dry periods would be March and July. Your highest wet period would be May and October. That's for the last 30 years. That's the trend. Mr. Speaker, this is what we describe as an intensity map showing the distribution of rainfall. You will notice that these areas in green would represent, based upon the key, it's for members here as well, would show you your highest concentration of rainfall on average over the last 30 years, which represents the parishes of Portland and St. Mary. That area would be where you get your most rainfall over the last 30 years. Slide. But this is what has happened in March. You will notice that your highest levels of rainfall have shifted. And in fact, the parishes of, go back to slide, the parishes of Portland, St. Thomas, and St. Mary would be exhibiting drought-like conditions. So there is a deviation, a variability from the long-term trend in our weather. In fact, what has happened is that rainfall has shifted from the northeastern end of the island to the northwestern end of the island. That has an implication for water distribution within the corporate area. So if you go to April, that is what the situation now looks like. So you're now moving more into drought-like conditions. And in fact, your St. Mary and your Portland, where we would get most of our rainfall, which would supply the Yallas Valley water supply system. And Yallas would be somewhere about here, the water supply system. That water runoff that would supply that system is performing well below standard, and therefore the Yallas system, which carries water into St. Andrew, into the Mona Dam, is not performing as before. Slide. So this issue of climate change, members, is real. That there is this change from our 30-year average, as pointed out by the Meteorological Service of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, the graph, the table that is now being displayed shows the rainfall for each parish measured in millimeters. And we're showing you rainfall for 2019 against 2018. And then we are also showing rainfall on your 30-year average. Then we give you the percentage rainfall of the 30-year average currently. So, for example, Hanover in April 2019 received 95% of the rainfall that it would have had in the 30-year average. The points to note would be Manchester is only receiving in April 2019 56% of the normal 30-year rainfall. But look at the variability. So March had 114%. Sorry, yes. And Manchester was 136. But look at the variability. So, important to note, Portland presently is only receiving 33% of its 30-year average rainfall. St. Mary is only receiving 41% of its 30-year average rainfall. St. Thomas is at 56% of its 30-year average, and Kingston and St. Andrew is at 62% of its 30-year average. But note that that average rainfall would still be, in terms of millimeters, would be still smaller than almost all the other parishes that have rain. So the situation is that officially we could say that St. Mary and Portland are officially in drought. Kingston and St. Thomas are near drought conditions. Near drought conditions. The drought would be that you would possibly be at 60% of your normal average for 2 months. So we are near drought. But slide. This shows the rainfall across the island. And your areas most affected by drought conditions. So generally the island is close to drought conditions generally, but not yet officially declared a drought. But definitely some parishes are experiencing drought conditions. So definitely we know Portland, St. Mary, parts of St. Thomas are experiencing definite drought conditions. Parts of Clarendon and parts of Manchester and St. Elizabeth. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the situation we now face. There is a variability where the rainfall is now in the northwestern side of the island, which affects, well, not having rain where it normally falls affects the catchments. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, the ability but even more than that, we are now having water falling, rain falling where we don't have the population density. So our population density is in the southeastern end of the island. But our water resources are more abundant. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a result of this, the National Water Commission has implemented notice, which it gave notice of on the 24th, well, it gave notice yesterday, and it will take effect on the 24th of May. And, Mr. Speaker, the effect of this restriction is that persons should not be using water for watering gardens, lawns, well, should not be using NWC piped water. It's a prohibition which has legal implications. People can be prosecuted. So just to be clear, persons should not be using NWC water, piped water, potable water, for watering gardens, lawns, grounds, for refilling or supplying tanks, ponds, swimming pools, and the like, for washing vehicles, for washing off pavements and pathways, or for any purpose which may require the use of a considerable or excessive quantity of water. Mr. Speaker, this prohibition affects 90 water systems right across Jamaica, and the NWC will be publicizing those systems so that our citizens will know the areas that are under prohibition. I'm using this medium to appeal to Jamaicans to conserve and to comply with the prohibition. Mr. Speaker, the present water shortage is not a situation where the government, by virtue of any capital expenditure, can bring immediate solutions. We can bring temporary solutions by providing the trucking of water and tanks for storage. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm now announcing an additional $100 million for trucking of water and the distribution of tanks to be allocated for the parishes that are declared to be affected, which will be Kingston and St. Andrew, Portland, St. Mary, and St. Elizabeth. So this is an additional amount to deal with the emergencies in these parishes: Kingston and St. Andrew, Portland, St. Mary, and St. Elizabeth. Let me also add, Mr. Speaker, that the NWC continues to truck water and to distribute tanks in affected communities, particularly in the corporate area. To date, the NWC has spent $205 million for the trucking of water since the beginning of the financial year in March 2019. $205 million. The NWC will continue to spend on the trucking of water and the distribution of tanks. So all of Jamaica will still be supported with distribution. But in the 4 parishes that we, by virtue of the data we now have from the Meteorological Service, we will put an additional $100 million. How we intend to do this, Mr. Speaker, is that I've asked the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, the Honourable Pernell Charles Jr., to meet with the MPs in the affected parishes and the councillors and with the NWC to work out a detailed distribution schedule for trucking, to ensure, first of all, that all schools, daycare facilities, nursing homes, public sanitation conveniences, hospitals that they are given priority in the trucking of water during this difficult time. Well, when we meet, they will determine how they will spend this additional resource. Mr. Speaker, I am not here saying that this is the only response of the government. As we get more data from the Meteorological Service, we will respond accordingly. The month of May is still being assessed. The original projection coming from the Meteorological Service was that between April, May, and June, we would have seen an increase in our rainfall. That has not materialized. So we are waiting the end of June to see what our rainfall projections, whether or not they have met up to the projections, actual outturn. And at that point, then we may have to make a further allocation or increase the parishes that are severely affected. Mr. Speaker, last week I had committed to bring the House up to date on the water supply projects and the other improvement projects that are being done in the rural areas. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the NWC, we have a very well-run and effective organization called the Rural Water Supply Limited. They are, in effect, an engineering company, but they are also, they specialize in water systems. So they're very good at developing rural water systems. In the budget this year, we gave them close to $800 million for them to undertake new water systems. Mr. Speaker, I want to just quickly run through the projects, and the MPs here can take note and inform your constituents. There is a project, well, we have projects that are ongoing, 9 projects ongoing, Portland Cottage in Clarendon. The scope of works include pipelines, a pump station, and storage facilities, and they are also repairing existing pipelines and extending to adjoining communities. Over 5,000 persons will benefit from this. And hopefully, well, not hopefully, this system will be taken over by the end of this year. There is Top Reading Horton in St. Elizabeth. The scope of works include new pipelines and a solar pumping facility and a storage tank. Approximately 400 persons will benefit from this project. There is Tinsbury in St. Mary, and the scope of this project includes the rehabilitation of intake and pipeline, and this project is substantially complete. There is Reach in Portland. The scope of work includes the rehabilitation and upgrade of intake, pipeline, and storage. This project is substantially complete. Hermitage in St. Anne. Scope of works include pipeline for a housing development, and this project is substantially completed and has been formally opened. In Spring Gardens in St. James, the scope of work included the development of the intake, the pipeline, and the storage, and this project is substantially completed and was formally opened. In Burnt Ground St. James, the scope of work included intake, pipeline, and storage. The project is substantially completed. They did work at the Enid Bennett School in St. Catherine, including the installation of rainwater harvesting systems, guttering, storage, and solar facilities. and this project is expected to be completed in June 2019. Rockall Primary in St. Andrew, same kind of work, installation of rainwater harvesting system, and this is substantially complete. Mr. Speaker, we have several projects to undertake within this financial year 2019-2020, 20 such projects. Flatfield in St. Mary, scope of work include the supply and installation of pipeline, construction of civil works, including intake, storage, and treatment. That project will start in July 2019. In Golden Hill in St. Andrew, the scope of works include the rehabilitation of a 60,000-gallon tank and the supply and installation of a pipeline. This project should start this month. Penn, Lucky Valley in St. Catherine, scope of works include intake, pipelines, and solar pumping facilities and storage. Procurement activities have started for this, and we expect to commence this project in June and complete it in October 2019. Sligoville Pipeline Extension in St. Catherine, scope of works include the supply and installation of a pipeline, and this work is scheduled to start this month, and we expect to conclude in early July 2019. Peart Spring in Manchester, the scope of work includes an improvement to the intake, solar pumping facilities, pipeline, and storage, and the work we expect to be completed by August 2019. That project had already started. Tiki Tiki in Manchester, whose constituency is that? Is your constituent? Good Minister. Scope of works include improvement to the intake, solar pumping facilities, pipeline, and storage. Work has already begun, and we expect to complete, Minister, in August 2019. In Aberdeen, Top Aberdeen in St. Elizabeth, I believe that would be Mr. Redmond. St. Elizabeth Northeast. Scope of work would include a solar relift station, pipeline, and storage. The procurement has begun for this. We expect to start in July 2019 and complete by December 2019. Middle quarters in St. Elizabeth, that would be Southwest, Minister Hutchinson. Green, middle quarters. Works include the extension by 2019 and completed by October 2019. Hurlock in St. James, the scope of works includes solar pumping, pipeline, and storage improvements, and we expect to begin in June and complete in October 2019. In Maroon Town, Tangle River, St. James, we would include their improvements to the intake, treatment, and storage, and we expect that work has already begun, and we should be completing this in April 2020. Charlestown, Kildare in Portland. This will be the rehabilitation of a major pipeline. The contract for the pipes are in place, and the works should begin in August 2019. In Thickets in St. Anne, we'll be improving intake, putting in a solar pump, and improving pipeline, and this we expect to get underway in September 2019. In Johnny's Hill, Clarendon, We will be improving the intake and laying new pipelines, and this project is proposed to commence in May 2019 to be completed by July 2019. In Dublin Castle in St. Andrew, we'll be doing a pipeline extension there. The procurement for the materials are underway. Construction should commence in July 2019 and end in September 2019. Hamwalk Riversdale in St. Catherine, works include a storage tank and new pipelines. This project is to commence in July 2019 and we expect to conclude in December 2019. Matney Spring in Clarendon, scope of works include intake, pipeline and storage. This project is to commence in July 2019 and is expected to be completed in January 2020. In Trophy Hole in Hanover, minor water supply system. This project is to commence in July and expected completion in October 2019. Pear Tree Grove, St. Mary, the scope of work would be the installation of a solar pump, pipelines and storage. This project will commence in July and is expected to be completed in December 2019. Watermount in St. Catherine, the scope of work includes the installation of a pump, new pipelines and storage. This project is to commence in July 2019 and is expected to be completed in April 2020. Redlands, Clarendon. Works will include the improvement to intake and pipelines, and the project is proposed to commence in May 2019 and is expected to be completed in July 2019. The Rural Water Supply Limited will be undertaking the following 11 catchment tanks and rainwater harvesting systems during this financial year. The Success Catchment Tank in Hanover, material procurement is underway. The project will commence shortly. We expect to complete this project in August 2019. Axe and Adds Catchment Tank, I wonder if I got it right, in Hanover, that's it? That's for that project in Axe and Adds, the material procurement is underway. The project is to commence shortly and we expect to complete this project in August 2019. In Blenheim Town, that is the Blenheim Town Catchment Tank, and this is in Manchester, not Hanover. So that's good. So material procurement is underway. The project is to commence shortly and we expect to complete in July 2019. In Lorimer's Catchment Tank in Trelawney, South Trelawney, materials procurement is underway. The project is to commence shortly and expected completion of works in August 2019. Stewart Town Catchment Tank in Trelawney, material procurement is underway. The project is to commence shortly and completion is expected in August 2019. Essex Hall Primary School in St. Andrew, we are installing their rainwater harvesting systems including guttering, storage tanks and pumping. That is underway already and should be completed in August 2019. Lawrence Tavern Primary School, rainwater harvesting system including guttering, storage tanks and pumping. Construction is underway and is expected to be completed in August 2019. Schofield Primary School in St. Elizabeth, rainwater harvesting system, construction is underway, expected to be completed in August 2019. Littitz Primary School in St. Elizabeth, same rainwater harvesting system, completion date August 2019. The Lawrence Tavern Health Center in St. Andrew, works include the supply and installation of storage tanks, and works are underway, completion in June 2019. Gravesend Catchment Tank in Trelawney, Gravesend, that's north. Gravesend, that's North Trelawney. This project is to commence in July 2019 and expected to be completed in September 2019. We are working on other projects, Mr. Speaker. And the Rural Water Supply Company Limited is now undertaking the necessary project development and designs for 7 projects, which will be included in this financial year. Islington in Portland, the scope of work is being presently defined in collaboration with the NWC. Rejoin in Hanover, we are doing a water resources assessment study now, and very shortly we will determine the extent and scope of the project. In Queenite, Keith, St. Anne, the scope of the project is being redefined in collaboration with the NWC, which would include pipeline storage, wells, and pumps. Brandon Hill in Clarendon, the scope of work is now being defined. Cornwall Barracks in Portland, the scope of work is being defined. In Hayfield, St. Thomas, the scope of work is now being defined. And in East Westmoreland Catchment Tank, that is the East Westmoreland Catchment Tank, the scope of this project is being defined in collaboration with the Westmoreland Municipal Corporation. It's a massive tank. So, Mr. Speaker, this is giving the nation an update as to what we are doing with rural water. And just to be clear, rural water doesn't necessarily mean that this is just water for rural areas. We use the term rural water to define water supplies that are not administered by the NWC and for which the beneficiaries do not pay a water rate to the NWC. It's a good company. It's doing great work. Mr. Speaker, so that the members of the House understand that though we have rural water, and rural water is dealing with minor water supplies and improving existing supplies and creating new sources of supplies, which are generally either managed by the parish council, sometimes the citizens themselves manage the water system. The NWC is also present in rural communities, and they do have utility systems in rural communities, and they are investing in these systems as well. So I wanted to give the House an idea of the spread of the NWC's present capital expenditure on water infrastructure. And you can see that they are doing projects in every parish in Jamaica. And I will just quickly run through them. Yes, you could get a copy of the slide. And the MP should pay close attention because there might be projects here for your constituency. In Luana, Millquarter, St. Elizabeth, we estimate 600,000 persons will benefit from 6,000, residents will benefit from a water main replacement, and the contract is already let, so works should begin shortly on that. The Essex Valley in St. Elizabeth, we estimate that 25,000 persons will benefit. We have dug a new well, and it is currently in testing, and this will take water up to junction. And that project, as you can see, was a $60 million project. In Hounslow, Williamsfield, Hopewell in St. Elizabeth, 20,000 persons will benefit from that. It's a new water supply system, and it is now complete, $28 million. Dunbar's Corner, Mannings Hill High School in Westmoreland, Mannings Hill. Oh, Mannings. What am I saying? Forgive me. And somehow I was transported to Kingston when I should be in Westmoreland. Forgive me, member from St. James, West Central, who is a proud graduate of the Mannings School, which is one of the premier schools in Jamaica. Sorry, the Manning's High School. How could I make? Forgive me. Forgive me. The Manning School. The Manning School. We believe that 7,500 persons will benefit from the replacement of a major water main in that area, and that will be $35 million. We are awaiting the pipes to arrive in the island. Byron Hill, Samuel Prospect in Trelawney, again, we'll be replacing a major water main there. In Sandy Ground, Black River, St. Elizabeth, 25,000 persons we expect to benefit again. We are replacing a major water main. The contract is in place and should start shortly. In Victoria Town, Smithfield, Grovetown in Manchester, 5,000 persons will benefit, and this is an extension of pipes and improvement to that delivery system. 5,000 persons we expect to benefit. The cost of that is $31 million, and they should begin that shortly. We'll be doing some work on some tanks, described as bolted steel tanks, island-wide. In Kingsland, Greenvale, in Manchester, this is improvement to the distribution network there, working in conjunction with the NHT. We expect 40,000 persons to benefit. This is in the Mandeville area generally, and that's $45 million will be spent on improving the distribution system there. And then we will be doing 23 tanks and pumps island-wide to assist with gravity feeding, and this is at a cost of 75 million Jamaican dollars. Mr. Speaker, there are 3 projects that we are doing, and these are long-term projects. In Cascade, Claremont, Jericho, and Hanover, we're doing Mason River, Sandy River, Kellets in Clarendon, and Nonpareil Retirement, Orange Hill. These projects were done out of the cash flow of the NWC. The overall cost of this project, these 3 together, would be in excess of $1 billion. In excess of $1 billion, but they have done it out of their cash flow. Yes. Yes. But remember, when you do this, put the 3 of them. Yes, this is to finish up. So those 3 will be $1 billion. And we expect that about 25,000 Jamaicans will benefit from improved water supply, reliability, and quality in water supply. For Jordan Run, Agualta Vale, Highgate, Islington, and St. Mary, we're putting in a completely new system, and that's $100 million. In Itoboreal, Windsor Castle, St. Mary, Portland, we expect 3,500 persons to benefit from that. That system is completed. We spent $6 million on that. We're going to be doing sundry works, meaning a variety of work, pipe laying, improving catchments, and so forth, in Portland, St. Mary, St. Anne, and St. Elizabeth, and the costs are there. And in Queenite, in St. Anne, we will be developing a new water system at a cost of $20 million. In terms of major projects now, in Christiana Spaldings, we're going to be doing improvement work and extending the distribution network and the water treatment facilities, and that's for $60 million, Christiana and Spaldings. In Whitehall, water treatment plant in St. Thomas, that is to commence shortly, $145 million. The White River water treatment plant in St. Anne, we expect about 40,000 persons to benefit, $12 million. Waterloo, Patton Park, Mount Dawson in St. Catherine, that work is ongoing to improve that system. In Green Park, Bamboo St. Anne, 6,000 persons we expect to benefit, and we will be spending on improving the well there $95 million. In Higginstown, Industry St. Anne, we're going to be doing development works to extend the water distribution network, $42 million. Mason Hall, Hamilton Mountain in St. Mary, we're going to do improvement works to the network there, $110 million. Connors, Ginger Ridge, St. Catherine, we have already given out the contract for this. We have to develop a new water source, install a tank, and install a transmission main. That's $12 million. In Clydesdale, Content Gap, Guava Ridge in St. Andrew, that work is ongoing to improve the transmission system. In fact, we'll be extending the transmission system, $26 million. Whitehall, Newmarket, St. Elizabeth, we expect 5,000 persons to benefit. The work there is ongoing, and we will have to develop a new well source, $71 million. Albert Town, Ulster Spring in Trelawney, work is ongoing. We are doing pipe laying and improving the intake, $53 million. In Canaan, Adelphi, that's in St. James, we expect 7,000 persons to benefit, and the work there is ongoing. We'll be doing a rehabilitation of the well, install new tanks, and improve transmission. Mr. Speaker, we have projects planned for 2020 to 2025, and I'll quickly, and those are major projects right around the island. I'll quickly run through them. In Whitehall in St. Thomas, we expect to spend $140 million doing a rehabilitation of the water supply systems there. In Erie Castle, Port Morant, St. Thomas, we have to create a new source of water supply for that area, $160 million. In Ferry Hill in Portland, we have to develop a new source, $230 million. In Jordan Run, Agualtaville, St. Mary, we have to develop new wells and continue the expansion of the network, $150 million. In Hamilton Mountain, Mason Hall in St. Mary, we have to expand the White River system and extend the network. That's $520 million. In Queen Heights in St. Anne, we have to develop a new water source. That's $375 million. In Cave Valley, Alexander St. Anne, new water source to be developed in addition to the distribution systems, $850 million. In Tangle River in St. James, we have to upgrade and expand the distribution system, $240 million. In Cambridge, in St. James, we have to do an improvement there to that water system, projected $120 million, same system improvement and rehabilitation. In Union and Balaclava in St. Elizabeth, we have to develop a new source. That's $640 million. In Kempshill, Clarendon, we have to again develop a new source. We have to equip the well and run new pipes. That is $235 million. In Pedro Plain, St. Elizabeth, we have to develop new water sources there. We are projecting $635 million to do that. In Bulstrode, Westmoreland, we have to rehabilitate the water treatment plant there. The projected cost is $795 million. The estimated cost for this is $5.8 billion over the next 5 years. Mr. Speaker, I went through this involved process to explain to the nation that the NWC and Rural Water and the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation is very sensitive and understands the frustration that the nation is now facing, particularly citizens in the corporate area regarding Speaker, the real cause of our water supply challenges is that we simply are not getting enough rainfall to supply the storage and catchments that we rely on to produce potable water for distribution. So, Mr. Speaker, next week I propose to address the environmental issues that we have to contemplate and other measures that we will have to contemplate in our building, in our town designs. Yes, I have to do that in a statement. And explore other solutions, because the truth is, the deviation, if you could go back to that slide, the deviation that we are seeing in the weather pattern, if it continues, would mean a real threat, an existential threat almost, to the KMA region. Because if it is that our 30-year average normal trend has shifted from where we had made the investment to capture the rainfall water, and it has shifted to another end of the island, it would mean that we would have to now make far more significant investments in water infrastructure than we contemplated. So we are watching it very closely, and we are really hoping that the variability in weather will return to its normal 30-year pathway, so that we really do not have to contemplate the diversion of significant funds to make that kind of capital investment. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister, I have a couple of questions to ask, but before I ask a question, let me make a brief statement. For all the systems that you have announced, we had a conversation last week in this House in terms of the 200 plus systems across the country. There's no connectivity. And if we should go and spend all of this $5.8 billion, $7 billion, we will still be left with the 200 systems across the country are still independent of each other. So we're going to be faced with a problem because, and you've said it quite rightfully so, in Western Jamaica, we're having our adequate showers of rainfall right now. But we can't move that water to Kingston because there is no connectivity. So I'll revert back to my statement last week and speak to the management of how we manage the resources of water going forward. And I can honestly say, Prime Minister, if we should first look at the 200 plus systems across the country in terms of the connectivity, we would have solved a lot of the problems that we are now faced with in terms of water, in terms of moving water around, in terms of where your demand lies. So, Prime Minister, I want you to look at that first. In terms of rural water, we have the 15% now, which they say, you know what, I think the NWC is at 60-odd%, close to 70, in terms of citizens across the country who have potable pipe water as we speak. By 2030, the NWC has said that they plan to move it to 85%, and there is 15% which is still minor water supply across the country. Prime Minister, I think a lot of more work needs to be done. A lot of these projects that you have announced, I've seen a lot of these projects before. Within the rural water, it takes a project from conception to when it's executed, takes anywhere between 3 and 5 years. That's my experience that I've been there. And I can honestly say a lot of these projects have been on the books so far. A lot of these projects. So, Prime Minister, I think if we're going to look at rural water, my experience with rural water is, even though they're an engineering company, rural water normally sits and wait for work from the NWC. That's how rural water normally operates now. So a portion of rural water board sits on the NWC board, and a portion of the NWC board sits on the rural water board. So if rural water is now going to be an entity which is independent of the NWC in terms of executing these projects, then the time period can be cut in terms of the 3 to 5 years. But a lot of these projects that I've seen today, heard announced, is projects that have been on the books within the NWC and rural water for years. Prime Minister, another thing again. You have communities across, let's say, Western Jamaica, and where had adequate supply of water sufficient, but because of the investment in tourism, those communities are now without water. And they say all politics is local. I can honestly speak, that's the situation we are now faced with in Hanover, from Grand Palladium and a lot of the other hotels, which has taken off 1 million gallons each day from the main line, and put all of these communities back in terms of they are now faced, they don't have water within their community. So this is something we have to look at, because every tourist that comes into this country, Prime Minister, there was a study which was done, every tourist uses 400 gallons of water every single day. Every single day. So I think from a management standpoint, we had said before that if you had a hotel like Palladium which put in 1 million gallon tank, they're supposed to only go on the system every 2 or 3 days to retrieve water. But they go every day. So they're using from the system. So you have, from the source. So therefore, there is no control in terms of the management of the water. And that's where I want to go, the management of the water. So, Prime Minister, I would want you to take a look at that. A couple of years ago, we came up with the pump and tank program, which I hear you speak about it also in terms of putting $1 billion aside to deal with schools, hospitals, and other areas where the government agencies have to provide these sanitary, in terms of water, for its citizens daily. And Prime Minister, I am still yet to see that project fully executed in terms of the pump and tank program. And it was an excellent program. We're still waiting to see it executed. Now, again, a lot of the wells across the country, and I hear you speak about the Gualta Vale, and I know my colleague from Central Manchester mentioned before in terms of wells across the country that have adequate supply of water that could give this entire country water, is under private, it's privately held as we speak. If you take up Gualta Vale, I think I don't even know if we acquired the wells as yet. And that has been going on now for a good probably 8, 9 years. So we have to come up with a mechanism across the country in terms of all of these wells that we need to use, whether if it's the bauxite company or whether it's Jamaica producers in St. Mary, wherever the wells are, we have to come up with a way to ensure that we can get the water. Prime Minister, I hear you speak about climate change, and you're correct. But I can honestly say, in just sitting here, if the NWC, rural water, government, and opposition got together and say, you know what, let's look at the 200 systems across the country. Let's see how we can interconnect in terms of the connectivity. So If Westmoreland and Hanover have adequate supply of rainfall now, let's send that water to Kingston. I think whatever you had mentioned here to us today, I think that should have been the first step that I would like to see. Being somebody that has been working with the NWC for years when I was Minister of State in that ministry. Because Prime Minister, I have witnessed. You have one system stop 1 mile down the road. Another system start a mile up the road. And that community has no water whatsoever. And it stops right down the road. So I would want a study to be done within the NWC and the Rural Water as an engineering company to look at all of these systems and see how we can link it to ensure that we can serve the people of this country. Prime Minister, I think time has come now when we have to seriously look at it, because there's no sense in announcing a lot of projects, then we can't find the water. Then when we do find the water, every system that you have announced that Rural Water and NWC has announced here today, they're all independent also. So pretty soon we're going to end up having over 300 systems that are not linked. So you still won't have the flexibility. You still won't have the flexibility to move water from one area to another. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member. Just very.
I tell you, we're going to be here for a long time tonight. Permission to speak from a seat other than my own. No, Prime Minister, you know, if you notice how many members of Parliament from rural Jamaica stayed back. Because last week, when I saw on the system that the Prime Minister will be addressing the notice from Parliament, the water crisis, I said, well, there's a crisis. The people in Kingston, I live in Kingston, I live in the country too. And I have seen near to where I live, people from Mannings Hill Road, Red Hills Road, coming to catch water. A lot of jeeps and vans and this and that, because they said there's no water in those areas. There are areas in my constituency where there's no water too. So we stayed back because we thought something was going to happen. Either we're going to say we're going to improve the trucking immediately or something. We thought because of an emergency. But we got a good overview of what you plan to do. When you want to know if there's a drought in Clarendon, drive past the Mapen Bridge. When you look down your bridge and see the rain in a dry, parched, there's nothing in there now. I passed there yesterday morning because nothing coming from the hills. There are I have 3 systems in northern Clarendon Hills that deals with NWC. The Kellits water supply, been there from 1960s. We did some expansion at one point in time in the early 2000s. But Kellits has grown. We even have Juicy Beef. It's the fastest growing town in Jamaica, Kellits. We are growing by about 6% per annum. All right? I keep telling you that. And if we were Jamaica, if Kellits was Jamaica, it's about 6% per annum Kellits is growing. Ask the Statin people and they'll tell you. They'll tell you how fast Kellits is growing and expanding. But it's the same system we have there. If it rains for 2 days, nobody in the area gets water because there's no settling. It's mud, you have to turn off the pump. And when there's drought, real drought, you have to turn off the pump again. The NWC president will tell you, because I talk to him a lot, call him a lot. There are times when you have to turn off the pump in Kellits. It is sucking the sand. Nothing to suck, the sand. So you have to turn it off for days for the system to build up. There has not been much work on the source. This is a Prime Minister, allow me. This is a source that supplies all of Kellits and environs and Crofts Hill. You're talking about 10,000 people. But we have not worked on the source for years. There's no settling tank. There's no expansion of the source there. So what did we do? We made an investment. Allow me, Prime Minister and members, please indulge a rural man and talk for them constituency. I didn't talk unless they adjourn me. Relax now. We stayed back. Ed, the fact that we stayed back. No, the fact that we stayed. The speaker is allowing me because the speaker's constituency and mine suffer the same problem. That's why the speakers are allowed. When I talk about water, I talk for the speaker too. Because we share common borders and the same problem. And I talk for Mike. Because if there is no water coming from the hills, member Ascot and member, and we can't get any water down there to pump. So we invested in a system called the Bullhead Mesa River Supply. I saw you put it there. And we are 3/4 finished. 3/4. 5 years. We have been languishing to finish it. 5 years. Stop, go, stop, start. But we're going now. Here is what maybe you don't know. There are many communities in Jamaica that get their supply from a thing called entombment, where an MP, a councillor, community, find a little source in our little corner that never dry. Plan a work day and buy some rum. Dig out the source. East Rural, St. Andrews like that. West Rural, North Clarendon, North Central. All of these we are called entombments. These people don't pay a water bill. We make the source concrete, dig it out, and lay the pipe to the community and give people water. I have about 23 of those systems. If the pipe bursts up, the MP have to buy the pipe. Huh? What's on your money? From the... No, it's CDF. But there are big areas that depend on that kind of water source. Crooked River, Bray Head, all of these places. You talk about Redlands is there. Is that really Redlands? Should be Red Hills. Redlands has a water supply, so the rural water can correct it. Because we did a supply that comes from Redlands down into Red Hills, and we have kindly, Prime Minister, you might recall, you granted me the funds to buy the pipe for Red Hills, so we already have the pipe. It's just for them to do the work. Yeah, I'll approve it and give it. 380,000 worth of pipe. I can say it. Thank you, Prime Minister. We should clap. Yeah, we should clap. I appealed to him, and he gave me the money through the source, liquid source, sundry, and I got the pipe. So it's just for the rural water now to come in, the source is there, and the people will volunteer their work to come and do it. But here is where I wanted to tell us now. Immediately, we need some money for trucking. And I noticed that Clarendon is not noted in this. Manchester is not in this. It is urgent. What used to happen, I don't know what we used to do, because everybody them think different. What used to happen during the drought period when Evan Thompson declared drought, MPs would be given an allocation. Several said, this is for trucking of water. Please contact the local, either the NWC or the parish council, and you work out your trucking plan, because some communities have one community tank. Only one tank to feed the school, feed the churches, and feed the community. But I don't see anything here for Clarendon. Yes. But there has not been any trucking in Clarendon. Well, in the hills of Clarendon. Nothing at all. So, the Minister of State, Charles, with response for water, housing and works, will meet with the MPs in the parish of Kingston and St. Andrew, Portland, St. Mary, and St. Elizabeth. That's the Minister without portfolio, Minister Charles. But you don't say Clarendon. There's a drought. I don't know what Evan Thompson telling you. There's a drought in Clarendon. There's a drought in Manchester. And my brother Evan have to he needs to go out and see when the Bullhead is dry, the Bullhead Mountain is dry, the center of Jamaica is the Bullhead. East, west, north, south is the center, North Clarendon up there, the Bullhead. When the Bullhead is dry, the entire Clarendon is dry. Because nothing left falling. That's not good. Farmers, you know what the farmers have to do? Like Manchester farmers. Catch a little water from the little river to... You speak? All right, go on. So, Prime Minister, we really stayed back because we want our people to understand that it is being addressed. You made your budget presentation, you called some areas. Janice Hill was mentioned already, Brandon Hill was mentioned already. It's the now I'm talking about, you know. I want tomorrow or Labor Day when I go to St. John's Basic School, I have to use my van to carry the water, go give the people at St. John, because the water not going there, because there's nothing to pump. So, Prime Minister, I am begging you, on behalf of the deep rural MPs, on behalf of the deep rural MPs, I am begging you, we will come have a meeting with you, both sides, and we will tell you what's going on in our constituency regarding the water. We will meet with you and your team. All of us, the South Trelawney, the East Rural, the West Rural, the Eastern Thomas, it's rough out there because some areas you will have to drill a well. There are some areas, you know. Let us take James Hill, finally, Mr. Speaker, finally. James Hill at Claude McKay High School. Claude McKay High School is there. Famous Jamaican poet. Good place. You've been there a couple. Good yam too. All of James Hill is dry. There's a catchment tank had not been repaired for a couple of years now. The community-based organization and farmers group got a grant to repair it. But there's nothing to go in the tank except rainfall. But there's a source which was a formerly NWC source that can supply the whole of James Hill and its town and the schools around, but it has been abandoned. Nothing is going on. Nothing is taking place. You ran some new pipes there. Don't forget when my friend Larry Broderick was the MP, 2008, but nothing came through the pipe. Yeah? You went and ran new pipe and didn't do anything to the source. So it doesn't make sense to run new pipe, expand the source first. I said, my father, Thomas Dahlia, blessed memory, spent all of his life in water. I grew up, I will tell you, grew up, money must dealing with pumps and water. So we know how to solve it. When the member tell you that there are so many pumps in Veer and Monimos and all over and in Kingston, they are there. We can get them, it can happen. And let us try our best now to see if we can deal with this immediate situation. Prime Minister, I thank you very much. That's why we wait on you. And I'm begging you, let us sit down with you one day and we go through what is happening in our constituency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Members, let us get a consensus. Prime Minister made a statement, and it is not normal that we are going to have a debate on it. However, because of the importance of this matter, I think we can all decide that we are going to allow members to say, well, please don't take half an hour. So Mr. Paul has indicated before that he would like to lead off. And then, yes, so let's go, Mr. Paul.
Prime Minister, I'm not a rural MP, but Prime Minister, I heard you mention earlier that the Essex Water Valley project, Essex Valley project is about to happen and that the people of Junction will be happy. As you're aware, Essex Valley is a defined area, and this is a project that both sides have been working on for many years. And my understanding in meeting with the management of Alpart recently and the adjoining communities, the anticipation was that this water that has been made available would serve the immediate environs and eventually cascade to include the people of Junction. And we don't envy the people of Junction. What you have said today is that the water is going to Junction first. No. The question is, when you turn on this pipe, where will your water reach first? Because you do have thousands of people who have been promised many years ago that they, in the Essex Valley, will receive water.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, the matter of connectivity is one that directly impacts Eastern Westmoreland. And so I stand in solidarity of the point made by the spokesperson on water as to the importance of connectivity. The reality is, Prime Minister, choking of water will never ever alleviate water issues in deep rural Jamaica. And the truth be told, Prime Minister, my constituency has several water sources, but they are not connected. And the dynamics of the lay of the land is that you'll have rainfall in one community. For example, I live in my constituency. Where I live now, rain is falling. But in another section of the constituency, you're getting calls for water. And that problem could be solved through connectivity. So my contribution to this debate is to support connectivity. And I want to know now, Prime Minister, how soon can your plan be brought before us, parish by parish, for us to start dealing with the connectivity issue? Because failing that, we're still at square one. It is also my humble belief that for major, well, like Kingston, Portmore, desalination is indeed an option to explore. You have Montego Bay, which is in a similar situation to Kingston, Portmore, etc. The population, you'll never find water sources, sufficient to supply all the demand, especially with the new building code giving more rooms to tourism in these areas. And these water that we are using now for domestic water should really be agricultural water. So in the development of rural Jamaica, that must be given consideration. Sources designated specifically for agriculture and connectivity from major sources to alleviate the water, potable water issues. So, Prime Minister, I notice also catchment tank development for the parish of Westmoreland. But I will say to you that we too are in need of funding for the trucking of water as we speak. I will not make it a contentious matter. I'm just placing it before you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Yeah.
Mr. Stewart first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, South Manchester has suffered long and hard, as you would have known. And we are very happy for the Victoria Town supply. But what is the timeline that is there for the completion of that project there, for Plowden, Marlhill, and other areas? And Prime Minister, another question that I have here is that I've noticed on your map there that St. Elizabeth and Manchester were determined as normal drought areas, and yet Manchester was not included in terms of the areas that would be getting assistance. Can we be considered, sis? South Manchester and Manchester in particular?
Hold on. I have a very brief. No. Mr. Speaker. Wait on. No.
Members,
Mr. Speaker, I want to ask.
we have already agreed.
Just 3 points. And I have a very, very brief on the points, Mr. Speaker. Well, there's nothing in the presentation for my constituency. And Prime Minister, there's an area known as Gimme Me Bit, right in the Vernonfield area. For several years now, a well has collapsed. I've spoken to Water Commission and written them umpteen times. And the community sits there in the middle of hundreds of wells probably in the Vere Plains. But every day is a problem of little or no water. Well, there are plans. But I want to say, Prime Minister, to ask the Water Commission to look with some urgency. Government was right there. Persons have now been relying on the National Irrigation Commission for domestic water. I want to ask that be given some priority. Second point I want to ask, Prime Minister, I've passed on the ferry for quite a while now and I've seen the pipes that are supposed to convey water from St. Catherine into the corporate area, as if the project has stalled, because I don't know why it should take so long to run a few meters of pipe to provide some additional water. Final point I want to raise is that when we're in government, the issue of the damming of the Rio Cobre was on the agenda. I believe some contracts or some discussions took place with the Chinese to do testing, and it would provide a source, a substantial source. Argument about the porosity of the rocks were put to rest because we hear it is good enough. Can you say what is the situation in terms of that Rio Cobre dam which was discussed?
Mr. Stewart, and then
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, you mentioned the Kingsland to Greenvale jointly with the NHT, which I imagine is going to the Perth housing scheme. But I want to find out if there are going to be any connectivity along that route for the communities that in that community of Kingsland. As it is right now, the main passes through Kingsland to Mandeville. Sorry? No, this is the Kingsland to Greenvale. Right? It's an NWC project, upgrading of the pipes. But as I would imagine, and you said this is being jointly done with NHT, so I imagine this is improving the water supply to go to the Perth Road housing development. But as it is now, that main, the current main that is there, passes through Kingsland, but Kingsland has no connectivity to the main, so Kingsland has no water through NWC source. The pump and tank project, you stated that it's $75 million for this pump and tank project. Yeah, the pump and tank project. Are you able to state, because this pump and tank program, I remember, was announced from when Bobby Pickersgill was Minister of Water, and it's going about 5 years now. A lot of most rural water supply would be affected by this pump and tank. And what you have, and I can mention one of them in my own constituency in Cowick Park that has been on the list for the pump and tank. But this tank itself now is obsolete because you can't patch it anymore. And so I would want to know how many tanks will be, and if we, at a later date we can get a list of tanks that will be replaced in this budget year in this program. But 23 tanks. But I'll also urge on you, Prime Minister, to see if that budget for the pump and tank can be expanded so that areas, smaller water supply areas like Cowick Park can get quick relief from not having any water. What I'm not clear about the $100 million that you announced, Prime Minister, and you said in response to the question to the member from North Trelawney, North Clarendon, that it will be other parishes will feel the effect of this $100 million. But how will we as Member of Parliament be able to assist in recommending the areas that water will be delivered? But there is a larger fundamental problem, Prime Minister, is that when you have NWC customers, and I can mention the community of New Green, that used to get regular source of water, but no longer is getting water through the NWC main for some reason. But yet still, I have to be taking money out of my CDF to deliver water, as there is never enough trucks in the parish of Manchester for the delivery of water, both for parish council, for us as members of parliament or private citizens, much less for NWC to be contracting private contractors now for delivery of water. And the normal source of NWC customers, when there's no water, NWC will then deliver water and it is charged back on their bill. Right? Am I right, Mr. President? Yeah? But when they call NWC now, they can't even get delivery of water because there's a lack of trucks. And the main source of the trucks filling up, which is in Porous, in a period like this, when you go down there, it is a traffic jam. One truck can probably get one load for the day because of the backup of trucks having to load at that facility. And it is a real problem, especially for schools, whenever they want delivery of water, because there's just not the source itself, one, and the lack of trucks in the parish of Manchester. So when we're talking about delivery, I want us to look even more in depth. That is why the rapid response worked to a certain extent in rural parishes when we had, because, no, I know, there's no more rural. Sorry? The tanks are all over the place. But also, when it comes to rural water, even though they may be rehabilitating what we call parish tanks, in many instances, the communities have outgrown these parish tanks. And what we're doing is that we're spending money to rehabilitate the parish tanks. You get a shower of rain, but within a day or two, they got dry again because the capacity is much smaller than what the community actually needs. So where some communities like myself and Northeast Manchester may not get running water immediately, the expansion of some of these parish tanks for larger capacity of water is something that I'd urge you to look at in the future.
Mr. Speaker.